podcasts.
Welcome back to the Michael K. Show. I've been looking forward to our next guest, and I'm going to embarrass him before he comes on because that's what I do with guests. Joel Sherman, his stuff in the New York Post is so smart and so provocative. I defy anybody who covers baseball for a living to be better than Joel. I mean, that is a must-read if you're a Yankee, Met fan, baseball fan, whatever. When I read him, it makes me go, that I didn't consider that. That's how good he is. So now that I've properly embarrassed him, let's bring in Joel Sherman of the New York Post. Hey, Joel, how you doing?
Thanks, Mike. That's quite the introduction. Should I embarrass you now?
No, I'm good. Because you have some ways to embarrass me. I don't think that should be on the air.
No, it was going to be flattering.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
So Mike and I have known each other for like 40 years, and, but we're friends. But, like you have a family, I have a family. We both have multiple jobs. When we sat courtside together at Fordham, it was a real reminder to me how much I really like hanging out with you. It was a great couple of hours.
Thank you. And I'll even go further. It's kind of funny because Joel and I kind of have dirty minds, and we're sitting next to Jack Curry, who does not. So we actually had to keep it quiet from Jack, some of the things we were saying. Is that fair, Joel?
Yes. Yes, there was a lot of leaning over in the opposite direction and waiting for the sneakers to screech in ours. So, that's...
All right, so a couple of weeks ago, it seemed like Pete Alonso did not have a path back to the Mets. Now, people are talking that could be a path that he has. And I want to ask you this. If that, in fact, is true, Joel, is that because he has told Boris, I want to go back to the Mets, or is there nowhere else for him to go?
Well, I think that there's very limited places for him to go, and I would say there's zero places for him to go for what he perceived his value might be when this process began. There is nothing that the modern front office pretty much dislikes more than a right-hand hitting first baseman in their 30s with limited or no base running, defense, athletic advantages. It's just their models hate it. This is how these front offices who very much work in lockstep see the world. And so, I wrote this a couple of days ago. Literally 25 off seasons ago, Greg Vaughn signed the largest free agent contract. Greg Vaughn was an outfielder, but he was a very limited outfielder. He was Pete Alonso. He could hit home runs. Richie Sexton once got a big contract. 9 off seasons ago, Chris Davis got a big contract. If Pete Alonso was born in the 70s or early 80s, he'd be fine. But that's not how this marketplace sees him. It all began to work against him. And I think, now he's batting his eyes at the Mets again because, in a way, it's a place to go. It's a place of comfort, but it's also a little bit face-saving, right? Like at the end of the day, you go back there and you could do the pledge. Well, I never wanted to leave. I had offers other places. I turned down, whatever. But this has not been a kind marketplace to Pete Alonso. And the reality is, during the season, anytime you talk, I obviously asked a ton of Pete Alonso questions around the sport, and they were all like, I think he's going to have a tough free agency. And sure enough, he's had a very tough free agency because the modern baseball world does not like the profile of this player.
All right, so then I pivot, or I piggyback on that. If the modern baseball world does not like his profile, then David Stearns doesn't like his profile. I think you're the one who reported that the offer was about $68 to $70 million over 3 years. And at that time last week, I said, it's clear they don't want him. Do you think that they take him back simply because of the fact the Met fans love him? Because if David Stearns doesn't like him, why are they signing him?
So it's a great question, Mike. I would say this. It's not David Stearns it's clearly David Stearns for the Mets, but the offers have, these teams all pretty much read from the same metric Bible, and very few of them break out of lockstep now. And if they did, if there was some team out there that was willing to do the kind of number that Alonso was interested in, my suspicion is he'd sign it. Every time a Met fan has angrily said to me, why are the Mets doing this? I'm like, well, the Mets are certainly doing it, but so's the whole sport. And the reality is he hasn't, at least he hasn't been offered anything of substance that he would do from any place, because it's now tomorrow, I think it's February 1st, and spring training begins kind of right after the Super Bowl, and he's an unsigned player. So there's this whole thing. Why would the Mets do it? I think that the Mets have a number out there that they're comfortable about. This is what his actual value is. I dare say, Mike, Steve Cohen has established when he really wants something, like in the art world or in the baseball world. Look at what he's wanted over the years. He wanted the Mets. He made sure no one would outbid him. He wanted to sign Francisco Lindor long-term. He gave him the third largest contract in history at the time of signing. He wanted Carlos Correa before he failed his physical. He was willing to go over $300 million for that and take his payroll to almost $400 million if that had gone through. He was told by Yoshinobu's agents last year, stop bidding. He's going to the Dodgers. He wouldn't have stopped bidding. Another player like Correa, like Lindor, who was in his 20s, and he went to $765 million, which, John Heyman was on top of it. It feels very much about like $250 million more than they thought they were kind of have to do at the beginning, but he's 26 years old. The profile of what he wants as a player is somebody who starts with a 2, plays a prime position, or is a starting pitcher, and Steve Cohen will move heaven and earth, and some of this has happened with David Stearns as his head of baseball operations. Again, Pete Alonso simply does not fit in this bucket, and it's kind of like reading from an old book where, oh, no, we pay for homers. There was a time where the game would have closed its eyes and paid for homers. It doesn't do that anymore. There has to be age and or positional value or defense and or base running added to it to get the big money over a long-term contract.
I wonder, because when I was a writer, I remember at the winter meetings, Scott Boras would have these, these big binders and, would illuminate you about players. And now I look at the front offices and they're so smart. They're all from Harvard and MIT or whatever the case may be. And I like Scott Boras. I love talking with him. He's very, very interesting. But I wonder, is his ultimate effectiveness somewhat blunted now by the fact that the people in the front offices are not former players, they're not grizzled old guys. They're really smart young people that Scott's not going to hoodwink them into doing something that they don't want to do.
Mike, it's about the property that you're selling. And, I hate to turn human beings into this, but I think in the matrix, which is how these front offices look at things, it's a house. Oh, the house has great value or it doesn't have great value. It's how the players look at it. Juan Soto, he could have signed to multiple places for well over $700 million. And I think even his detractors would say he had a great property, but he did a great job of drawing that out, making sure the Mets and Yankees were in it at the end, and getting to a number where, even me, I said, I think the upper end of this, I kept saying late in the season, then early in the offseason, I think the upper end is like $720 million. It's double Aaron Judge, and I thought that would matter to a guy who once did double Kevin Garnett for Alex Rodriguez's record contract. And so it went way beyond even my highest expectation for it. So I just think it's about the property. Like he got, after a year where Blake Snell got locked up in like a bad market for Blake Snell got a good deal. Corbin Burns got a good deal. These are Scott Boras clients. But he's gotten locked up because I think that either you accept at the front end of a negotiation that Pete Alonso was born at the wrong time to maximize his skill. And he does have a skill, Mike. When he squares up a ball, it goes. And he has great durability and he can play in a big market. But those are not outweighed by how baseball operations departments currently view things. And I just think like there was no way, unless you were going to make a concession very early on in the marketplace, I'm willing to take short years here when there's a lot of teams involved. And I just don't think that's, I don't think that was on not just Scott's view, but, Pete has a pretty healthy ego and view of who he is. I don't think you could have said to Pete Alonso at the beginning of this, hey, Pete, I think if we could do like 5 years at $110 million, we'd really be doing something. I'm sure Pete thought, especially when it came to the Mets, I'm a homegrown guy. I'm very popular. I just hit one of the biggest home runs in the history of the team. Aside from everyone on the planet, not named Aaron Judge, I have the most homers since I came up. That should be worth a lot of money. And in this marketplace, how that kind of player is viewed, he is not.
Talking with Joel Sherman of the New York Post. Also, you can see him on the MLB Network here on the Michael Kay Show. What did you make, Joel, of Hal Steinbrenner's comments to Meredith Marakovich the other day?
The ones about the keeping up with the Dodgers?
Yeah, us owners can do that. And the only thing that he said that I took exception to was us, because the Yankees could do it if they wanted to.
They could, Mike, and I'm not here. I think that if you own the Yankees now, that you should use what I'm going to use a term like disposable, another like $10 to $20 million to finish off a team that I think needs another infielder, a lefty reliever, and to me, a backup catcher. Because like if you think Alex Jackson is going to make your season as the backup catcher for a championship team, I think that's probably not going to happen. And to think that two other guys in the minor leagues who are older, who've never played in the major leagues, are going to solve that. And we saw what happened to Austin Wells at the end playing every day last year. That really slowed down. So I think there's ways to go and do this, and to like leave everything on. Can the Yankees trade Marcus Stroman's contract or not is, to me, strange. On the other hand, understand that like in his case, a $300 million payroll is going to come with about $70 million in tax, right? That's $370 million now for your payroll, or $375, $380, wherever they end up once the trade deadline comes through. They've got the big annual payment, about $85 million to the city. They're anybody in the game will tell you at the top of the sport, for the other stuff they pay for, minor leagues, front office, it's like that. And I think we know, like, as opposed to someone like Steve Cohen, who runs a big hedge fund, or Guggenheim, or Rogers up in Toronto, the Steinbrenner business is the Yankees. And if they were willing to sell the Yankees to somebody who has that kind of wealth, I think that they can knock it. They get 7, 8, 9, but who knows how many $1 billion. But this is the family business, essentially. And anybody who goes across the street to the minor league facility knows there's a lot of grandchildren and children now involved with the Steinbrenners who all work for the organization, and Hal's taking care of everybody. Again, this is not a tin cup. I think the Yankees should spend a little more, but I think the Yankees, as crazy as it sounds, because they still lead in revenue, are different. Let's just use the Dodgers as an example, right? The Dodgers have over $1 billion in deferred money. Well, they're a hedge fund. They probably take the deferred money, invest it, and then end up paying players with their own money, and they make money. They're clearly taking Ohtani's money and probably doubling or tripling it, and all the money that they deferred. Mm-hmm. In theory, the Yankees could probably find a fund and do something similar, but it isn't their fund. It isn't as sure. You know what I mean? It's like I don't want to kind of make excuses for the team with the number one revenue, but they do have a $300 million payroll. They don't have like a 220 or 175. They are number 3 in the sport right now. And even Steve Cohen has talked about lowering his payroll this year. It is less currently. If the season started today, I have a feeling it will be higher. It's lower than the Yankees right now. They're 4th. And so, I mean, $300 million is a lot in payroll, and I know the feeling. But and the other thing I always think about, Michael, is like, what's the move? So, like, if the Yankees announced today that they were signing Alex Bregman, the next thing that every fan would say, oh, they're signing Bregman, but they're not going to trade for Dylan Cease. Like, if that's what you're feeding, if you're feeding that monster, it never stops. Right. I've had friends of mine who are Met fans call Steve Cohen cheap because he won't do Alonso. Guy signed a $765 million contract with Soto. He had a $375 million payroll a couple of years ago. I just think that this is the social media, echo chamber, and I'm not sure that any owner could ever win that game.
All right, final thing, and we have about a minute. Everything with the Yankees getting a third baseman or backup catcher or the lefty reliever seems to be predicated on trading Marcus Stroman. And whenever I sit down and go, who's taking the majority of that $18 million? He didn't even get up during the playoffs. He didn't make a roster in one of the series. Is there a market for Marcus Stroman?
I mean, there's not a market where you get rid of you use the word majority of the money. The question is, when the smoke clears, and by the way, there's still like Nick Babette's a free agent, Jack Flaherty, Kyle Gibson. There's a lot of starting pitchers who are still free agents that teams could sign. There's not a lot of teams looking to spend money. So, to me, it keeps coming back to, the Yankees are going to have to get them down to a number so low that it might be unappealing to them. But then there's going to be, look, Mike, you're very experienced at this. You know that starting in about 10 days, whether the Yankees are going to play some nonsense game like, oh, we haven't decided who our number one starter is or who the five. We're just getting everybody ready. When everyone knows he's the sixth starter, that's a veteran guy who knows he's the sixth starter. That's going to be an uncomfortable camp. Now, somebody usually gets hurt and things are solved that way. But that's going to be a situation where maybe the Yankees say, hey, we've got to eat $13 million of this, get them down to a $5 million player. That's better because we at least can then go spend $5 million on take your pick of things that they need to solve.
Great stuff, Joel. I could talk to you for hours, but that's not the way it works. I thank you for coming on.
All right. Let's go sit courtside again soon.
That'd be nice. That's Joel Sherman of the New York Post. You could read him. So glad that we could get him on.